What we're going to do now is work through the rest of the QuestionBot2 program. This is from lesson 16 in the Intro to App Development with Swift iBook. Where we left off in the last video is we started to get some things to actually show up on the screen. They're not actual questions and answers, but it's at least some information that we can see the program is keeping track of the number of questions and answers properly and submitting that. So just to review, I can type in something. It tells me that was question 0. It gives me the timestamp, and then it produces answer 0. I can type in something else, and we get that was question 1, and it produced answer 1. And we can continue doing that. We get question 2 and answer 2. So what we want to do now is what we're going to work on is how to actually get our questions that we just typed to show up and the answers that are being produced to show up on the screen. And we want to keep them in order. And so the way we're going to do that is we need a place to essentially store those so that when they're inputted, they're stored somewhere, and then we can access where they're stored and output them. Because and right now, as you can see, we're getting the questions and answers are being produced, but now we want to make sure that we've got we can see it in the console here, but now we want to make sure that those questions and answers are stored and show up properly on the screen. So first, we're going to go ahead and quit the simulator here, and let's go back to the iBook. So that's what we're starting in this adding storage section, and we want to store as many messages as we have. We want to keep them in the order and give back the message at a specific index. And the easiest way to do that is to create an array of messages. That's the first thing we're going to do. Is we're in our the class we've been working on, the Swift file we've been working in. We're going to create this variable messages that is an array of the message data type. Once again, we're doing everything in the conversation data source.swift file. That message data type is defined here in the message.swift. Every message has a date, a text, and a type. So what I'm going to do is at the top, this is really the first thing we want to do is create this variable messages that is an array of message objects or message objects. Now what we want to do is anytime we get a question or we get an answer, we want to create a message instance and store it in the array. And they show us how to do that in the textbook. So we're going to go to both the add question and the add answer functions. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a message with whatever text has been passed into that function. And then we're going to add it or append. We're going to add it to the array using the append method of arrays. So let's go in here. So in the add question, we're going to create a new message object. This will be message. And we're going to get the current date and time. The text is whatever the question is here that was passed when this was called. So we're just going to input question, and the message type is a question, so we're going to do dot question. And then after this, I'm going to say messages.append, and the new element I want is that message we just created. What this does is now when we call this function, it's going to create a message object and add that message object to our messages array. Now it can be a little confusing. I have a message constant. I have a variable called messages. That's an array of the data type message. But just be really careful with your cases. Anytime we're talking about the actual struct, it's capital M message. And then when we create variables or constants, good style is we're creating an array, so let's call it messages. Let's make it plural. And we're creating an individual message instance, so let's just call it message lowercase m. I'm using those terms object and instance somewhat interchangeably, I know. I know in the textbook they prefer to think of it as an instance, and I'm coming from a background working with object-oriented programming, so I'm thinking less instances and structs and more objects and classes. So if you hear me say object, it means I'm referring to an instance. I'll try to be more consistent as we go through. Now I want to do pretty much the same thing when we are adding an answer. I'm going to copy this from add question down here to add answer, but now what's being passed is not the question, it's an answer, and it is of the type answer. But we're still appending with that message. Notice as well that I use the message as the name for the constant here and here. And that's okay in this case because these constants only exist within the scope of the function they're inside. So this message constant only exists inside these brackets. So inside these brackets, I can create another constant of the same type with the same name, and they're not. It's not going to be confusing to the compiler. Okay, we've now created. We're now creating message objects or message instances and adding them to our messages array. So now, what are we going to do with those? So now the next thing we're going to do is we actually want to, on the screen, instead of seeing that thing where we were seeing that's question 0, it's answer 0, we actually want to see the text. And the text is now in messages, in that array we just created. What we're going to do is take out this whole conditional statement and messages at, because the message at, this is what is called to actually get what we want printed on the screen. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace this whole conditional statement with one line. Return messages index. Index is this parameter here. And what's happening now is when this is called, it's saying, hey, we need the message at this index, and that's what we're going to put on the screen. That's done in the conversation view controller, and we're now saying, oh, just take the item at that location in this array, and now it should work. If we run the program now, which I will, if we run the program now, it's going to work as we want it to. It's going to print the messages on the screen. But we're going to do a couple more things, which is we're going to end up cleaning up the code a little bit because we've got a couple things that are still in the code that we don't need in the code anymore. And so we're going to clean those up. But I just want to show you that doing this, creating this array, adding questions and answers to the array, and then returning what's in the array is going to make our program work. So I'm going to say hello, and it it said hello, and it replied with, why, hello there. I'm going to say, who are you? It's going to give me a generic response. And I'm going to say, where are the cookies? And it's going to say, in the cookie jar. So all those things that were being produced and shown in the console down here are now actually showing up on the phone screen when we run the app, which is what we want.